And without anything else to say, I'm going to go ahead and invite Miss Julue Cosgrove down up here to take over.
You got me going?
I'm going to get out of the way, and then...
Except I'm going to need that clicker from you, sir, that you got in your little phone. We'll trade places.
Thank you very much. And if you see Mike next time, just let him know this can be done very quickly.
I'm going to kind of walk around a little bit because I'm short. You know, they say that God grows us to perfections, and some of us just get there a little quicker than others, so we stop. So I'm going to walk around a little bit because I hate to be behind the lectern and the podium, because then all you can see is my nose and my glasses, okay? I want to thank y'all for not getting up and walking out right now, because I'm going to be talking about something that we just really, I don't like to talk about it. I'm sure you have probably a little bit of a boulder in the pit of your stomach right now. We're talking about sex slavery and human trafficking. But what I want to talk about is called what I say is a silent storm. Now, most of us can tell when a storm is coming, right? You hear the thunder, a little bit of lightning, temperature might drop, wind picks up, you can smell the rain, and as we get older, you can kind of feel it in the joints. What I'm going to be talking about, I call it the silent storm because a lot of people go through their daily lives and they aren't aware that this is brewing. And it's brewing over our nation, over Texas, over this area in your neighborhoods. And what we're going to talk about is human trafficking, how it affects each one of us, and how unknowingly we may be affecting it and helping it to grow. And so we're going to go through 3 things tonight. I'm going to talk about exactly what it is. I'm going to talk about how it affects us. And then I'm going to talk about ways that you may be helping it to grow in Longview area without realizing it. And then we're going to talk about how you can change that around to make a positive influence in your daily lives to help thwart this, okay? So will you bear with me when we get through a little bit of the ugly stuff? We're going to end on a positive note, okay? All right? Okay. Now, Frederick Douglass, of course, was a slave in the 1800s, and then he became one of the top abolitionists of his generation. And what he said is, I expose slavery in this country because to expose it is to kill it. And slavery is one of those monsters of darkness to whom the light of truth is death. And you see, human trafficking is really nothing more than modern slavery. And I believe that light dispels darkness. But if I only have one little bitty light, it doesn't really shine very much, does it? You can't really see it. But if I give one to other people in this room and we all start shining our little light, then suddenly we can make a difference, can't we? So think about, oh, I could never do anything. Yes, you can. And we're going to talk about simple things that you can do to shine your little light on this evil and to dispel it from Longview in your community. Okay? Now, human trafficking is not new at all. In fact, there's human trafficking in the Bible. How many people remember the story of Rahab the harlot? People know that story? She lived in Jericho, and she hid the Israeli spies before they came and entered the promised land. Joshua sent Caleb and some other people in to kind of scope it out. Are people friendly? Are they not? Are they pygmies? Are they giants? What's going on? How should we prepare? I mean, you know, don't we do that? We trust the Lord, but not entirely. We want to find out a little bit more information on our own. And she hid them. Well, a good friend of mine, a Christian author named Carleen Hamill, wrote an amazing book. She took those few little verses in the Bible and created an amazing fictionalized novel on the story of Rahab in her life. And she really researched Canaanite society. And human trafficking was so embedded in their society, it was a natural part of it. And they would have children as little as 2 and 3 years old in the fields for 12 to 14 hours a day, without breaks, without food, because they could pick the weeds for the flax and the wheat. They were short enough to do that and to squat on the ground. Babies were sold for human sacrifices. Little girls and little boys were sold to the temples. You can get my drift on why they were used there. Even Paul talks about slavery, doesn't he? Look at the letter of Philemon to Onesimus. And he talks about masters being kind to slaves and slaves respecting their masters. So slavery is even biblical. And basically, as I said, human trafficking is just a fancy word for slavery. All it is you take a human being out of his or her natural environment, away from their family or their friends, and you traffic them. You take them to another place by coercion, by force, you control them, and you make them do your bidding. It's a power struggle. All of us humans have some type of power struggle, and that's all this is. It's a power struggle. And from the beginning of time, anytime one human being has power over another, there's going to be abuse. It's going to happen. We live in a fallen world. So anyway, so Carlene wrote about her, and it's an amazing book. Now, even in our country, the first country to truly establish human rights, the Bill of Rights, our Constitution, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, these were really kind of unheard things. And now we're up to the late 1700s. So we're talking about thousands and thousands of years, and human dignity was an unusual concept. And yet even in our nation, the land of the free, from the very get-go, we have been involved as part of our society in human trafficking. From enslaving the Indians by the conquistadores when they came in, to the English settlers. We brought people from Africa, we brought people up from Haiti and Mexico, we brought people from China, we brought the Eskimos down, the Native Americans. Again, a power struggle. So even in our land of the free, there is human slavery. And it's going on today, even though it's against our laws. It's going on today. Sorry, my scarf is going in. There, now can you hear me a little better? Okay. Now, freedom does begin to ring, and people do begin to realize in the 19th and 20th century, especially when the industrial age comes along, that wait a minute, maybe we should treat human beings better. Maybe there should be labor laws. Maybe children shouldn't work 14 and 16-hour days without potty breaks. Maybe we need to take care of our citizens. Maybe we need to ensure that everybody has the right of freedom and liberty, pursuit of happiness, and to be a vital member of society. New concepts, but they began to develop more and more. And the United States, being the leader of this, started to spread that throughout the world. And eventually, in the United Nations, their Article number 4 states that if you are a member of the United Nations, you are not allowed to have slavery within your borders. And yet slavery does exist. In fact, almost 29 million people in the world today live in some form of slavery. If you kind of calculate it out, that's one in about every 235 or 236 people. That's amazing, isn't it? That'll turn your gut, right? Romania is widely known for human trafficking. You can buy kids off the street like you buy vegetables. It's also very active in China, but mostly in labor force. And we've all heard about that. We've heard about the horrible conditions that they have in the factories in China. In Cambodia and Thailand, I know missionaries who work there because, again, trafficking is a part of their normal everyday existence. It's part of their economy and part of their commerce. And it's open and blatant on the streets. In the Middle East, in India, in Pakistan, in that area, of course in Africa, especially right now in Ghana and Uganda, where there's so much political unrest. Remember what I said about struggle of power? Anytime you have a power coming in, they're going to squelch, abuse, try to control other people. That's how they gain power. Brazil is well known, so is Haiti, so is Mexico, and ladies and gentlemen, the United States is becoming a ripe field for human trafficking, and that's what we're going to talk about pretty much. In fact, there's only one continent where we don't know of any trafficking yet. That's how widespread it is. Now, when we think about human trafficking, most of us, of course, think of prostitution and sexual trafficking. But there's other kinds, and I've kind of alluded to it. There's labor trafficking, where you work somebody in horrible conditions. And actually, it's going on here in Texas. When I was doing research for this and writing my novels and speaking to lobbying groups and nonprofit organizations, at this time, and it's probably changed now because word has gotten out, I asked them, I said, if you wanted to find somebody illegally, if you wanted to find somebody to work long hours in the back of your dry cleaners or maybe washing dishes in your restaurant, what would you do? What would you look for? And they said, watch for the symbol of a boot with a spur. So you know what spurs do to horses, right? Watch for a boot and a spur. If you see in the Yellow Pages an advertisement with a little boot and a spur on it, that's a symbol that that person will get you in touch with somebody in the human trafficking part of the country or part of that city, and then you can hire them on and treat them however you want because they're probably here illegally. So it's going on. So in your favorite restaurant where you take your clothes to be cleaned, some of the farmer markets that you think are safe, there may be something else going on behind it. How many people ever read or maybe even saw the movie Oliver Twist? Charles Dickens? Fagin was a human trafficker. He took these street urchins, these orphans off the street. He was Big Daddy to them. He was going to treat them well. They're going to be part of a big family. He's going to take care of them. And what did he do? He controlled them. He took all the money that they made away. They lived in poverty. They lived in fear. That's the ingredients. Charles Dickens wrote about it. And we all studied it in school. Of course, you see them, if you ever go across Mexico, you see them on the bridges, don't you? You see the small children, chicle, chicle, one American dollar. A lot of us would believe that they are doing that to support their family. More than likely, their family has sold them to a trafficker, and they're doing that for the trafficker, and the child's not going to get much benefit from it. That's the reality. Today, 66% of the people who are trafficked are women. Can anybody tell me why they think that is? Exactly. Exactly. He said they're more submissive. I mean, women in general, we are controlled sounds like a harsh word, but especially in many parts of the world, women are controlled. They don't have the rights that men do. So they're already put into a vulnerable position and a position for further abuse as children, as women. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that baby girls in China were being drowned because they wanted to reduce their population and little girls just make more babies, right? It wasn't that long ago. So that happens. And unfortunately, women are not the only ones. Girls, boys, and men are trafficked as well. And again, we're talking not just about sexual here, but other forms, okay? There was a study done by international missionary groups over a 5-year period and rescuing people and putting them in safe houses and interviewing them. And they found that 85% of them were abused as kids. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because that's all the life they've known. So they're going out of the pan into the fire. It's new. I mean, that's life. That's normal to them. And that just makes them even more vulnerable and sucks them into the trafficking world. Now, to give you a little bit of background of how I got involved in all of this, it actually started out, I had to have major surgery, and I was bored, and I'm an author, and I thought, well, would anybody ever buy a book that started out as a dark and stormy night? And so I decided to write one, and I got to about chapter 5, and I hit a brick wall. And something told me that I wanted to write more than just a suspenseful story. I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to show a side of society that is not quite so pretty, but to also show that there's a redemption from it, that God's love can reign and light can defeat darkness. And I felt called that that's what I was supposed to do, is to bring out a deeper level. I just didn't know what. So I put it aside, and about that time, Carol Meyer and I became friends, and we went to England together with a church group. And then I literally came home, threw my dirty clothes in the hamper, packed clean clothes, and flew to Indianapolis because I was doing a workshop for a national women's organization. And while I was there and had a vendor booth with all my books out there, I saw behind me these long tables of just beautiful jewelry and wooden crafts and woven crafts. And I asked these women, who are you? This is beautiful stuff. And they told me, we are women at risk. And we are missionaries, and we support women and children in safe houses throughout the world. We're in 31 countries. And during that 3 or 4 day period, I talked with them, and I thought, I can do this. I can be a representative in Texas. I would really like to do that. And they said, we'll get in touch with you. And basically all it is that you get people to host a party. They display the jewelry and the goods that are made by these women in these countries. People buy them, and then 95% of that money goes right back to the safe house and to the women who helped make the items. It costs absolutely no money. It's all shipped to you free, and they even give you prepaid postage boxes to ship back what you don't sell. So all it costs is your time. I thought, I can do that. I go to conventions, I speak to groups. I could have a little bit in the back. And in 1 year, I made a little over $7,000 for them. And it didn't take that much effort. I thought, okay. And then I come home, and the church that I had joined about 3 or 4 months previously commissioned and laid hands on a young woman, and they said that they were sending her off to Cambodia to work on the streets and rescue women from trafficking. I thought, wow, this must be a really kind of a big deal. This is the second missionary I've met in a month. So then I got my Christian critique writers group, and a friend of mine brings a young woman named Joy Brooks. And she says, everybody Joy Brooks wants to join because she's just been hired here for the Dallas-Fort Worth area by one of the mega churches to start a blog on human trafficking. And I started laughing. And everybody looked at me and said, why are you laughing? This isn't funny. And I said, no, you don't get it. God and I have this thing together. If I hear it 3 times, I know it's from him. And I went home and I said, forget about it, destroy this, I don't want you to read this, I'm redoing it. And I went home and literally my keyboard smoked. And 92,000 words later, I had my first book, Hush in the Storm, because I found the purpose for writing it. Now, Joy says that ethical and moral issues concerning human trafficking in our society are devastating. Nothing good ever comes out of exploiting other human beings. And once that's accepted in the society, the family unit, the society, it all starts to fall apart. And that's why it's so prevalent in countries where there's economic upheaval. Do we have economic upheaval here? Okay. Are we bringing an environment for this to start happening? Are our families and our society beginning to fall apart? Yeah? Okay. Now, the good thing about the United States, like I said, we are the land of the free. We do have a Bill of Human Rights. And in the year 2000, the federal legislation passed the Traffic Victims Protection Act, TVPA, and it's been revised, and 2013 was the last revision of it. Why is that important? It's important because we in the United States fund more trafficking around the world than any other nation. Let me repeat that. We in the United States fund more trafficking around the world than any other nation. Why? Anybody have a clue? We buy more, exactly. We're a consumer nation. We're always looking for a bargain. How many people know at least 2 corporations that have outsourced outside the United States? Yeah. When I spoke at the Women's Club in Fort Worth, this lady said, you know, I bought a Lincoln Continental, an American-made car, and the armrest on the driver's side fell off, and inside it said, made in Honduras. How do I know it's made ethically? I said, did you call Lincoln and ask them? What if you got other owners of Lincolns to call Lincoln and ask them? What if 150 people in 1 month called Lincoln and asked them? You see, as consumers, we have power. Hershey's and Nestle's have both pledged within the next 4 years to change their practices to where any cocoa purchased and manufactured in their company will only be gleaned from ethically labored fields. That's huge. That's the power of consumer voice and advocacy. And as a consumer nation, we have that responsibility. Make sense? Okay. Remember this little light? I can call Verizon and say, I want to make sure the components in my phone that were made in Taiwan are done ethically. But if everybody in this room has a Verizon who has an Android calls in the next week or so, you think it's going to start a buzz? You know, the era of Sam Walters, made in America Walmart, is over, isn't it? It doesn't exist anymore. It's very hard. It's very, very hard to buy American unless you go to a local flea market where you actually know the craftsman, right? I mean, everything from our cell phones to the soles of our shoes, the food that we eat, it all comes from outside the United States now. So unless we have a voice and want to make sure that the products that we purchase are produced ethically, then how are we going to know? So your wallet is your power, and your voice is your power. Now, I'm a native Texan, and even if I wasn't, I'd be proud to be here right now. Can y'all still hear me okay? This is going down. Okay. Is that better? All right. Because Texas is one of the leading states in the past 10 years to address human trafficking in its borders. And one of the reasons that this became so necessary in Texas is because of our I-35 corridor. We're in the center of the United States, especially in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where I'm living now. We have so many interstates intersecting and webbing, and yet we're so densely populated, it's very easy to slip through the cracks and move people around. And you see, that's what human traffickers want to do. Because if you're going to control another human being, you want to isolate them. You don't want them to ever have any friends. You want to totally control their life. If they start to make any outside contacts, you're going to move them and travel them around. Y'all are on I-20. You're a prime location for people being trafficked through this area, just because of your proximity, because I-20 zips through. Between 1997 and 2007, only 7,613 cases of human trafficking were reported to state agencies and law enforcement. Knowing the illegal immigration population in our state, that's really pretty piddly, isn't it? But since 2007, since the legislature started getting involved, and more people like me, and more people like you are becoming aware of it, in 2013, that number changed in 1 year to 16,400. Yay! We're making progress. Now that's still a very small number when you consider, but we're getting there. People are becoming more aware. People are reporting things, and that's a good thing. Let me go back a second, I apologize. Okay. Now what we're going to talk about here is the new form of human trafficking that's happening. It's happening right here in your junior high schools. And that is Texas since 2009, House Bill 4009 of that year, established a task force of over 300 professionals from over 180 different agencies to all get together and interrelate and interwork to help close our borders to human traffickers. Texas, through the legislation, through Governor Perry. And this task force brought it to the Attorney General in 2011, and that 81st legislature passed it. And all these agencies are now interworking with each other. And I've spoken to representatives of quite a few of them, and it's an amazing web. So the traffickers know it's getting harder and harder to bring in humans across our border here. So they decided to turn inward. And they're turning inward onto our kids. Girls between the age of 12 and 14, boys between the ages of 11 and 13 are the most vulnerable. Why? How did you feel when you were 12 or 13? You weren't sure mommy and daddy weren't so great anymore. You kind of had maybe a little rebellious spirit. Your body was changing, you didn't like yourself, your self-esteem was a bit low. Suddenly peer pressure became a little bit more important. Those are all ingredients that is favorable to being sucked into trafficking. Because the gang, the older teenager, the cool kid in school, you want to be a part of that group. And they suck you in, and you become involved. Alice Jordan Ham wrote a book called Made in the USA. And basically, it's not a book you can sit down and read. You can read snippets and then put it away and think about it for a week. It's that heavy. Because basically, it's biographies of teenagers who have been saved from human trafficking and what happened to them. But it's an eye-opener. And they're true stories. And they have somewhat happy endings because all these teenagers have been helped. Helped by churches, helped by nonprofit organizations. But basically they said, especially with young girls, but it happens with young boys, an older teen attracts them. And it's a power struggle thing again. Remember what I talked about? People have power over another. Ew, she's a loser. Who cares? We don't care if we abuse her. Ew. It goes beyond bullying. And these kids see the guy with the fancy car, can throw money around, has girls on his arms, has the big jewelry, can spend the money, go to the free concert, go to concerts, pass out free tickets. They want that life. And does it involve drugs? Yes, of course. What's the best way to control another human being? Dope them. And it's happening in our junior high and our high schools. How? Suck them in. Mommy and Daddy don't love me anymore, but Jesse loves me. He buys me teddy bears. He buys me jewelry. He buys me flowers. He treats me like a grown-up. And then suddenly Jesse turns it around. And Jesse becomes abusive and mean, and Jesse has talked this sweet little girl into not only having sex with him, but his friends. And then he dumps her. And she's heartbroken, and she'll do anything to get him back. Thus it begins. So how do we stop our teenagers from being sucked into this dark world? We have to figure out where they are. Where is this happening? And it's happening anywhere teenagers gather. A big thing right now is called skip parties. Excuse me, getting over that bronco crud. Skip parties. Psst. Everybody's cutting out, 5th period. We're going over to Daddy's house. Your parents are out of town. We're going to party. And then out comes the alcohol, out comes the drug. There goes the inhibitions, and then they're vulnerable. And then in come the traffickers. Another girl that I know, another Christian writer named Peggy Sue Wells, helped Teresa Flores write her biography. Now, Teresa was a Castilian, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. Her mom was a socialite. Her father was a banker on Wall Street. They lived in a 7,000 square foot mansion in Pennsylvania. And for 3 years, she was trafficked out of her house without her parents knowing about it. Pure intimidation. And it happens. Book's called Slave Across the Street. And it's delicately written. It's very well written. And Teresa now is married happily to a Christian husband. They've got great kids. It's a happy ending story. Anytime there's sporting events or the malls during holidays, and especially the long hot summers, that's trolling for human traffickers. Concerts, you name it. Because basically, the teenager is all about peer pressure. And if they believe everybody else is doing it, they're going to want to do it too. Okay? So whether they're illegal immigrants or whether they're the kids in your neighborhood, what can we do? Let's turn this around and be positive. How can we set them free? Okay? One of the things is to keep your eyes and ears open. Look for symptoms of physical abuse. Look for them if they can't look you in the eye. Victims are taught to never make eye contact with anybody except their pimp. Because to make eye contact is to what? Exactly. And if they start to make friends, then they're not in isolation and they're not as controlled anymore. Of course, for girls, look for sudden changes in behavior, dressing a little bit older than they should, dressing more provocatively, things of that nature. And for teenagers, if they're always tired, they say they're working too long, they've got dark circles in their eyes, their grades start crashing, it may not be because they have a job at McDonald's. Okay? There may be something else going on. And we're such a consumer nation. These teenagers want money. They want money to do things. And they get sucked in, and of course, the pimp keeps all the money. Now, supposedly you see somebody, either illegal or a teenager, and you think, what do? The one thing that you do not do is you do not try to rescue them. And that's our first instinct, isn't it? Yeah. But to do so is to put the limelight on them, and 3 things are going to happen. They're going to be moved, they're going to be dumped, or they're going to be executed. Okay? So don't try to rescue them yourself, and under no circumstances try to give them money. Because that's power, and they're not allowed to have money. They're not allowed to have power. And if their coyote sees that they have money, that's not going to be to their benefit. So you can't do that. So what can you do? Like I said, we can be a voice. We can lobby and continue to gather strong, solid laws, not only for the victims, but against the victimizers. If you are so if you feel this is your calling, you can become a court advocate. Kind of like CASA is for children and minors. Trafficked victims need court advocates because the traffickers can afford the shyster attorneys, can't they? And the little victim who doesn't have any money will get a state-funded attorney. And if they're illegal, they may not understand. If they're a teenager, they may not understand. They need an adult with them on their side to explain things to them so they know their rights. This you think should be obvious, but it's so inundated in our society. Remove any form of it from your life. Ladies, if you're reading romance novels, leave the ones in the grocery store with the provocative covers there. There's plenty of clean Christian romance out there. Go to efictionfind.com. We post 4 of them every day. They're under $4 downloaded onto your e-reader. But you know are safe, do not have foul language, do not have explicit scenes. Don't go there. Keep a clean mind. The pictures that you see on the internet, the movies, those people are not actors. They're not doing it for fun. They're not making any money. They're trafficked. And this is something we can all do. If anybody has a smartphone right now, you can put this in. This is a free app, free to work. And what this does is this lists the major corporations that manufacture or sell in the United States, and it gives a list of their activities and whether they are using ethical labor or not. And it's growing. That's a really good app, free to work. And I've got all this information on paperwork back in the back as well for you. And this is what I think is the most important thing, because through Joy Brooks and her Prayer for Freedom, she has a free blog. Twice a week, she gives specific reasons and indications for people to pray to end human trafficking in Texas. And I've seen amazing results from prayer. Because for me, prayer is light, dispelling the darkness, for bringing the love of Christ into a broken world. And I think prayer is the most powerful tool that we have. And not only for the victims, but for those who victimize us. Because Jesus said that we should pray for our enemies, and that's like heaping coals onto their heads. So I daily pray for those who are victimizing, that their hearts can be turned as well. Now, this is the National Human Trafficking Resource Center that was set up through the TVPA in 2000. That's their toll-free number, or you can text Be Free to 233-733. And I would suggest, like I said, this information is in the back room. I suggest plugging that into your phone. And if you ever see anything that you think might be human trafficking, contact them. Or contact an organization, nonprofit. All of these are worthy organizations, nonprofit organizations that help victims of human trafficking, get them into safe houses, and help them train and become productive citizens. Or, here in North Texas and in Northeast Texas, you have these organizations. Now tonight we have Sakita in the back, if you want to raise your hand. And she's from one right here in Longview that meets on Tyler Street?
Yes.
Yeah, and I've got information on that in the back as well. So there's all kinds of ways that you can become involved. And any one of these organizations could love your help. Not just from your wallet, but man phone banks, help set up fundraisers, dinner raising, all kinds of different things, mailing things out, whatever. Yeah.
Can I mention Refuge for Life in Tyler?
Refuge for Life in Tyler?
But they,
Yeah, okay.
Refuge for Life, but the citizens of Tyler built a $460,000 safe house, totally
Woo-hoo.
from in a year and a half. They have room for 12 girls. They have 2 resale shops, one in Tyler and one in Palestine. That's what they do to support the money. And they go to the court hearings and juvenile halls. They try
Great.
to identify and get the girls off the street and that
somebody was
Refuge of Life is a really good resource.
Refuge of Light in Tyler, and you were telling about somebody else was telling me about a Hope Closet, right? The Hope Closet, which, yeah,
There's also a Rahab's Ranch and Retreat.
okay,
In Lakewater, that's a new nonprofit who starts by four women. One has come off out of the street herself.
super.
She's put the floor up, and they have bought some old retirement home over there. They've got different wings.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've got a tremendous program for restitution.
And this is wonderful because this is new. When I was researching the third novel that was coming up in October, Free to Forgive, and talking, I thought, what do you do with a trafficked teen? Where can you send them? And most of the time, there's not enough of trafficked safe houses. And they end up being put into foster care and getting into that system. So the fact that there's starting to be nonprofit organizations that are popping up and helping establishing safe houses here in the United States, like they are all over the world, is major. It's a major, major step forward. And I know it's not just for women who are trafficked, but women who have been abused, or children who have been abused. Yeah.
And this was started from the Madeline Project, where churches folks going into the clubs for dancers,
Great.
women and dancers. So, you know, it's odd that you be in church and you see the things that they're involved in.
Right.
Wow, you know, it's not your basic tea and cookies.
Right.
And again, they go in many times over the years, they take in gifts to everyone there. And with the times that I've been to go in, there's not a woman there that has not received a hug. They all are so hungry for love.
Yeah. And acceptance. Right.
They're
Right.
trying to be.
Exactly. Exactly. Because their self-esteem is down. They've been abused. They don't think they're worth anything.
Well, once this one lady came out, it took her.
We can't hear her over here.
Okay, I'm sorry. She's talking about an organization, and maybe y'all raise your hand so people can come and talk to you afterwards. Okay, and the organization you're talking about is, again, Rahab. Ranch and Retreat, and it's in Gilmore? Whitewater. Okay. So we already have several people in this room. If you're involved in any type of nonprofit organization helping out trafficked or abused victims, raise your hand. Okay, and y'all in Tyler. So these are people that y'all can intermingle with and find out more things about in your community. And of course, we all have areas in our cities that we just don't want to go in without locking our doors, even in broad daylight. I understand maybe Highway 80 is kind of a sketchy area, in Longview, where I am in Fort Worth, it's Las Vegas Trail. People just kind of know, except the cops, to stay out of that area. But it's happening in posh neighborhoods. Remember Teresa Flores? You know, she lived in the Hamptons and had a winter home in Pennsylvania. So it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Again, these are the books I would love for you to buy. Mine, of course, Hush in the Storm, and then Legitimate Lies is a sequel, and it takes it abroad. But again, like I said, it's redemptive stories. It's stories of women who have come in contact with human trafficking, but there's a way out, and they find redemption. They find the love of Christ. They find what true love is all about. I've talked to you about Scarlet Cord, Slave Across the Street, Made in the USA. Kathy Macias is a very prolific Christian writer, and she writes suspense and mystery. She writes other things, and she has a series out on human trafficking as well. And sometimes I think it's a little bit easier to swallow stories. It kind of diffuses it a little bit, but it gives you the same information. So these are all great ways. Your advocacy, your voice, your wallet. Find out where things you manufacture come from. Be a voice. Continue to lobby and legislate. Watch your neighborhoods. Watch the teens in your churches and in your neighborhoods, in your high schools and your junior highs. Watch out for illegal immigrants, because I think together we can break this in our state and in our community. We can be that little light that helps dispel the darkness. Okay, can you turn it back on? All right. Okay. Can we bow our heads in prayer? Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight in the name of your Lord and our Savior, your Son, who died on the cross for us. And we ask that you put it in our hearts to be aware of our other human beings that are being mistreated. And Father, we ask that you show us, through the natural talents that you have given us, ways that we can be your hands and feet in this world. Father, I want to stir your Holy Spirit in the hearts of these people to pray for those who are being victimized by human trafficking, and I want to also pray for those who want to victimize them and want to make profit off of them. Father, we know that you work all things, even evil, to good. And I pray that you will help instill in this community and spread your protection over Longview, Texas, and the surrounding areas, in Tyler, in Gladewater, in Gilmer, in Marshall. Help us become aware of how we can shine the light in the darkness, because your Son is the way, the truth, and the light. Amen.
Okay. Am I on, Tim? Can you hear me? All right. Yes. We want to take some questions. Is there any questions for Julie? You got another microphone? Do we have another microphone we can pass around? Okay, let me do that.
I think we need to give a round of applause for our AV technician back there. He's done an amazing job. My son is the AV tech for my church, and I don't see how he keeps all those knobs and everything straight, and when to turn on this mic and when to turn off that one. It's beyond my technology. Of course, so is programming my cell phone.
Give me a battery.
Yes, sir.
What's your last name, Julie?
My last name is Cosgrove, Cosgrove. My husband was a good Gaelic man. It means open field in Gaelic.
Okay, we had a battery change.
All right.
You said 28.8 million people are involved?
Just about 29 million people are trafficked in the world
Okay.
today.
Does anyone know the population of Texas? About 27 million. So that's
Wow.
more than the population of the state of Texas.
That's sobering.
Can you speak to how many in Texas or the United States? Might be?
See, it's very difficult in Texas because of the task force. I mean, it's really so new. The Attorney General and the legislature putting this into effect in 2011, 2012. You know how hard it is to start obtaining statistics. And so I really don't. What I do know is in 2013, that number of 16,400 reported to the task force state agencies. And that's a huge jump from 7,000 over 10 years. With the amount that is still trickling in across our borders, and now with this new wave of engaging our teenagers, it's massive. I mean, it's massive. I don't have the numbers, and I wouldn't want to speculate, but I think it's a lot more than any of us could ever realize right now, especially among the teenage population. You would agree, Sakita? Okay.
Julie,
Yes, sir.
do you have any kind of measure of the degree to which the drug cartels are active in human trafficking? And the reason I ask that question is because we know that their principal source of revenue seems to be moving people across the border illegally, and with that, carrying drugs.
Yes.
We hear sort of vague comments about them being involved in human trafficking, and I wondered if you had any real measure of that.
They say that human trafficking is second in the world as far as international crime. The first is drug trafficking, and really they're two peas in a pod. Because number one of the ways that you can traffic a human being and get them to make money for them is for them to be couriers for drugs. And you also hook them on drugs. I mean, a lot of these people are hooked on meth so they can perform long hours, and then they're giving downers so they can crash, and so they can control them in an environment, and they're going to pump them with meth again, and they're going to hook them. I mean, that's a good way to control a person. And so that gets into the drug trafficking as well. And in my book, Hush in the Storm, Jen's late husband was actually involved in both. And the cartels intermix between human trafficking and drug trafficking. Like I say, it's just two sides of a coin. The human trafficking is becoming more and more made aware of, but it's always been there in the drug cartels. It's controlling humans, humans controlling humans. Yeah.
Didn't our own government participate in a form of human trafficking when they took all the children at the border and dispersed them all over the United States and encouraged more to come?
One of the main things and the things that I'm proud of the Texas legislature, and I spoke to a lady who is an attorney for trafficked victims, especially illegal aliens in Austin. And because in Free to Forgive, it's about a 12-year-old illegal teenager, and it spans 10 years of her life, and then how she's brought out of human trafficking through the system that the state of Texas is establishing now. So I'm kind of riding into the future, so I want to make sure I was getting it right. And one of the things that they have stated is that it used to be that actually the legislature passed if there's a Hispanic minor from Mexico within the state of Texas borders, they're deported now, unless they can prove they've been trafficked. And if they can prove that they were kidnapped, brought across here against their and trafficked, then that opens them up to victim through the TVPA. That opens them up to seeking help, seeking counseling, getting into our school systems, things of that sort, to where they can become productive society members. They are granted a 5-year green card, and then they can qualify for citizenship after that if they so desire, or they can be deported. So that's beginning to change, and it's beginning to change because of nonprofit organizations and by lobbying groups, to where that type of thing can hopefully be prevented from now on. So there's advocacy, especially for minors. They're being trafficked in our borders illegally right now in Texas, not nationwide.
Anyone else?
Julie, if I can take a liberty and
Yes,
correct
ma'am.
you a little bit, because I know firsthand that the policy on the southern border, the complete southern border, is very simple. It's called catch and release. And that's the fact. That's the reality. That's what's really happening. What you're told by government officials at one level or another is all part of the giant deceit. And it sounds, after listening to what you're telling us, more and more like the federal government is in fact part of human trafficking.
Human trafficking has always been a part of this nation. I stated that.
But
I do know of individual cases through Joy Brooks and her organization in Dallas Fort Worth where this is changing. This is turning around, and there is some meat through the House Bill 4009. I'm saying we're making a dent, and I'm proud to be a Texan because of that, because that's not happening in a lot of our states. Yes, there's a lot of abuse. Yes, there's a lot of room that we need to. That's why we need voices here. That's why we need people to step up to the plate. It can change, and it's starting to trickle. It's starting to change. There are some positive things that are happening. It's individual by individual, but it is starting to happen. It's not all the way there. It's not all every single individual. And you can probably state cases where it has not happened. But I personally know, especially teens, where it is happening. in San Antonio, through several organizations down there. I spoke down there in October and met with several people down there. It's especially happening through nonprofits, but they're beginning to communicate with these state agencies through the task force of the House Bill 4009. And it's, like I said, it's starting to make a difference. It's a huge battle. But yeah, I'm sure there is some government cover-up, so to speak, going on. But there are also some really strong advocates and citizens like you all who are getting involved. And I applaud you for that. You're doing a good job.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.